Hello everyone, this is Doppler. It has been a while since I made another field video. This time I'm going to focus on Grogar. Even though we know that Grogars was in fact Discord in disguise. But let's assume if that was the real Grogar. Even that we don't know much about the real Grogar, but anyways. He had summoned all the other former villains like Tirak, Chrysalis, Sombra, and even Kozuglo to his lair. And he had offered them to join his alliance in a way to stop and defeat Twilight and the others and take over the Questia. But let's say that he managed to take over the Questia with their help. What will happen to them later on after all this? Since he has stated that he doesn't even trust any of them. So, here's the main question. What would happen to the other to his minions afterwards? Would he somehow discard them and send them back to all of them, perhaps that he would send back Sombra to this to darkness where he's summoned from, and send back Tirak and Kozuglo back to Tartarus, and perhaps even with Chrysalis. That is one way some people would say that after he managed to take on the Questia with the help, even with his spell, he probably had to have thought maybe had used their supposed allied help, and then he thought maybe that their help was now that he had all the help he needed, and that they had played the parts, and that now that their enemies had been defeated, and that now that Grugar is the main leader of the entire kingdom, and that he would just put back his supposed minions where he found them from the beginning. But let's assume that he managed to still keep them by his side, but not as advisors. But what would happen to his minions after if he managed to take over the Questia? Well, as we know that Sombra has stated that all that I think he cares is to be ruling the Crystal Empire by himself. As he also stated that he doesn't do things as us, only me. All it means that he doesn't even care to be part of some sort of alliance with others. All he thinks was in himself. He only cared about himself. And Grogar was even allowing him to continue to rule the Empire if he managed to take over it. So, if he managed to take over the Crystal Empire, and Grogar would allow him to rule the Empire by himself as he wanted, as long as he followed Grogar's orders and that he doesn't get involved in Grogar's affairs of how he ruled the kingdom. And as long that Grogar doesn't involve in Sombra's ruling of the Empire, there wouldn't be any problem. And for Chrysalis, though, her only thing was to regain the former kingdom of the Changelings back to herself. And if she managed to do so with help from perhaps from Grogar's magic and managed to take over the kingdom again, and that the same thing as for her as for Sombra, as long as that she rules only part of her kingdom, and that she always allow that she would be allowed to rule the part of her kingdom as much as she wanted and how she wanted, as long as she doesn't involve in Grugar's ruling of Equestria, and that Grugar doesn't involve in her ruling. As long as they both agree to respect that part of the deal, there wouldn't be much any problem with that. But what about Tirak? As we know, Tirak, back when he was first introduced in the show, all he cared was about Drake to take all the magic that was in Questia for himself. So how would that stop his ability to do so if Grogar took over the Questia? Well, let's assume that if Grogar managed to take over the Equestria, it is possible that Terek would have been given part, a portion of Equestria as his own kingdom, and that meant he could drain the magic from the opponents from his part of his kingdom. But as long he doesn't even disturb any some sort of that he doesn't steal the magic from that opponent within Grogars' kingdom, and as long he respects that deal, either of them would not be involved in each other's ruling, which made some sort of stable peace alliance between them. What about Kozuglo? Even that her biggest dream was to be a princess, like an alicorn. So if Grugar had his bell, it is a strong chance he could have offered and transform her to into an alicorn. And she could perhaps be ruling from the Cantlot and as she wanted, or perhaps even ruling from Ponymill by using the school as her own castle. So how will this happen? How will this supposed cooperation between Grugar and his minions turn out to work? Well, as long as they have their own parts of the kingdom as they want to rule, as they have to rule it as how they wanted to, and how much they wanted to, as long as they doesn't even get involved in Grugar's ruling of his part of Equestria, and that he doesn't get involved in their ruling of their part of their particular kingdoms. So as long as that they doesn't get involved in each other's ruling, I think that particular some sort of cooperation peace between each other could actually work. But that is the only thing that I can expect to happen because this is the only thing, the only way what I can expect to happen. What would happen to after if what would happen if Grogar had taken over the Equestria and that he would spread out parts of the kingdom to his minions so that they can rule as long as they doesn't get involved in each other's affairs and that they doesn't even involve in Grogar's ruling of Equestria. I mean, for example, that could have worked if that would happen in the showdown. Sombra, since even though that he stated himself that only things he cared about was himself and that he be able to rule the empire without anyone else involved. So, but let's assume that Sombra did manage to take over the empire completely, and that Sombra was still allowed to rule the empire as Himashini wanted to do so, even if meant to enslave the crystal opponents and sort of things. And as long as Grugar respected that part of the deal, that he won't get involved in Sombra's ruling, that he perhaps doesn't even care how Sombra rules the empire. But as long as both of them respect the deal, there would not much a problem that. No rebellion. And if it's the same thing for Sombra, for Crystalis and Grogar, if both of them respect the deal, not to get involved in each other's ruling, it would not make any problem. This is the one way that I could figure out what would happen if what would happen after if Grogar took over the question. But if you have your own opinion, your thoughts about this, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, subscribe, leave a comment, and as always, this is Switch Diablo over and out.